Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to talk about death. And it seems like such a gloomy topic, especially in this time where so many people are dying and where every day we live with, the fear of not knowing where the world is heading to. And so why at this time would anyone, heaven forbid, talk about something as gloomy as death? And I'll tell you why in a minute. The thing is about life is that it happens in a cycle. And part of that cycle is death. Just like forests burn down in order to make way for new plants or that seeds can germinate, so too the cycle of life must always include and does include death. And there are very particular, reasons for this that I can think of. Of course, I always say I have thought of reasons, I don't know the reason. Okay? And because I believe very firmly in reason and in understanding. And so one of the very, very important things to consider in life is that we are all constantly experiencing a death. Today is April the 9th, 2020, and by midnight, April the 9th, 2020 will have passed away. Khalas, maut. Never, never, ever, ever will April the 9th, 2020 happen again. Okay, so there we are experiencing the death of a time. And we are experiencing it constantly. Your cells are dying constantly and regenerating. Every 7 years your body would have completely renewed itself. Your cells would have completely regenerated. And with each passing second, we have aged, and we are one step closer to being terminated, to dying. And so life is all about, in fact, death, the dying at every moment, the passing of a time, the passing of a moment, the passing of friendships, the passing of experiences. Life is all about death, in fact. And then finally, the passing away and moving on to the next world, which is also part of life. And so, one of the very, very important things to remember is that death is actually a blessing. Death is a blessing. It is a blessing of being able to experience life in its fullness and not becoming bored, in a sense, with witnessing the passing of all things which must necessarily pass, meaning temporariness. Okay? Sometimes when you see people who are really, really old, you might, and they sit there, and they're not really able to do much. And you wonder to yourself, is this guy just not bored with living, maybe, I mean, he has seen so much and been through so much. Is there really more that he'd like to see? It reminds me of that movie, Highlander, where, this guy is an immortal and he witnesses the passing away of all his close ones each and every time. And it almost becomes as though living forever is a curse. And so that's just not the nature of this world. this is the reason why nobody lives forever. Because the nature of every single thing in this world is temporary. Why should you be any different? Everything passes, and so shall you. And instead of focusing on the dread of death, instead of focusing on morbidness or being morbid regarding the facts of life, one can seize the moment, seize the day, seize the opportunity to live life to its fullest. And when I say live life to its fullest, I don't mean in a hedonistic sense. I mean to be single-minded on focusing or in focusing on your goals. And so have goals, focus on them, and make the most of your time, the time which shall pass away, so that you are able to accomplish them. And so many of us, before this pandemic, we said to ourselves, you know what? If only I had more time to spend with my family. Well, many of us do now, right? If only I have more time to read. Well, now you do. Okay, if you are forced to stay at home and you don't have the type of job where you can really work online, and you happen to be fortunate enough to be in a country where your government would be taking care of you for this time, well, now you have the time. Some of us have said, you know what, I would like to upskill myself so I can propel myself further into reaching my career goals. Well, now you do. There are many online places offering courses for free. Some people have said, if only I had more time to write, because I really like writing and I want to eventually become a writer. Well, write away, because now you do. And so in all of this seeming or supposed negativity that we feel around us, this uncertainty, there's also a great hope. There's also a certainty. There's also the excitement of a new frontier, a world that may be very different than the world we are used to, but possibly better than the world that we're used to. And part of that happening, part of that possibility, really depends on what you do in this time. What you do in this time determines what the world will be like after this time. And so some things you can do, I would just give you some suggestions, right? Is that, now that we have realized that in life, money may really finally not mean as much as we thought it would. When you get to a grocery store, for example, and there are no groceries in it, right? This should encourage us all to try to grow vegetables in our backyards, if we have backyards to do it. If you live in a commune, to collectively do some gardening, grow some vegetables, This should encourage us to try to find more independent ways of survival. If you have never ever considered putting in a well point where you can get your own water and have the water tested and get a water purification kit and learn how to do that, get in there, do some research. If you can't have that done now, do some research on it. Read up on small scale agriculture, read up on how to look after your animals in a way that doesn't require expensive antibiotics and things like that. Okay. Look up at how to survive here. Basically, we have kind of become the how can I put this? We have become the dependents of our governments. And our governments are trying their best to retain that social order and structure, which is why they are giving free stuff and taking this seriously. But if there's one thing we should realize, and that is cities have historically, and still cities are fragile, very fragile. Because I kid you not, the people that are living out in the bush with no electricity are fine. Okay, they are not worried about food, they are not worried about water, they are not worried about anything because they have their own infrastructure. Us city folks might call it primitive. We might think, who wants to live like that? But guess what? You know, if the government stops functioning, those are the only people that are going to survive. The rest of us will kill each other over what's left in the middle of the city, right? So, you might want to start thinking about things like that, you know, and you might want to start researching into communal type existence where people help each other. What happens if a currency collapses, for example? You might want to look into that. People establish bartering systems, right? I'll give you some potatoes, you give me some onions. You grow potatoes in your garden, I grow onions in my garden, he grows carrots in his garden. That person has chickens and that person has, I don't know, 3 or 4 sheep, whatever, right? They start bartering. That's what happens when currencies collapse, because people still gotta eat, okay? Now, I'm not trying to say that the world will come to that right now. It probably eventually will come to that. I mean, it's inevitable, right? But if anything, this pandemic should show us how fragile we are as a human species, but also how fragile we are in our current setup. The fact that we have depended on central governments to administer and control our affairs in such a complete way. Now, I'm not advocating anarchy. I'm not saying that central governments are not important. I'm not saying that we should not, under normal circumstances, rely on the services our government offers us in exchange for our tax. Of course, this is a centuries-old format of governance. What I am saying is that a little bit of independence, especially regarding things like food, water, sanitation, and you know, even if, by the way, these days you can even do electricity independently. You know, it's not like I'm saying people gotta go to the Stone Age and forsake technology in the name of independence. That's not what I'm saying. But these are all things we can sort of look into now at this time while we are at home, and work towards a future that, you know, leaves us less vulnerable and less subjected to the measures of government, and less subjected to multinational corporations and things like that, because we are able to source basic things without needing to rely on money, for example. Because now you can see it. I mean, check, it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, you know. In some countries, you go to the shop and you can't buy anything to eat. Okay? I mean, in Germany, post World War II, they were burning the money to use it as fuel for fire, you know. The situation, basically, that we find ourselves in constantly is where we depend too much on an infrastructure that in reality, you know, just takes, you know, a little bit of wiggling to completely undermine and to possibly completely collapse. And then millions of people starve. And is that really an acceptable situation to be in? Thank you very much.